Okay, so Rabbi Smith, welcome. Thank you for doing this. Really appreciate it.
My honor, my pleasure.
So in part one, the soul in the world to come, you said that through the learning of how to die, you'll learn how to live. And I just want to say I really appreciated that, because I felt that even watching part one, I felt was changing me, was making me more aware and more conscious of how to, I mean, there's obviously a long way to go to put that into practice, but it definitely was making me aware, more conscious of what I was doing in this world. So I wanted to thank you for that. I also wanted to, though, say, as in addition to that, having gone through a lot of grief in the last 3 years, there's, and I don't know if this was just me and my own personal experience, or if this is, the universal, but there's a need to understand the world beyond this world we see, the spiritual world, so that it becomes more tangible. You can feel it, you can touch it, you can sense it more, because that's where your loved one is. And so in order to almost weave a new connection, have a new connection with them, you feel you want that world to be more alive, more real for you. So thank you on that kind of realm too. It was extremely helpful, and I'm sure will be to many people. So that's my little introductory remark. So the first thing I would love you to maybe talk a little bit more about, unless you say, no, you spoke enough about it, was Chaya, the group soul. I'll tell you why I loved it so much. I haven't before heard the Jewish kind of source for that. I came across this concept of a group soul from reading about somebody who does past regressions, reading his book, and he spoke about this concept of group souls, etc. He's somebody who and it really resonated for me, just because in my life I feel I've come across people that it's almost like there's that as soul connection. I feel like I recognize them. And often what happens is that there's a very intense interaction in terms of doing something in this world, which I can see is, as you said, furthering my purpose. And then sometimes that falls away, that relationship. And at first I was a bit confused about that. It almost felt wrong. It felt like when you have that kind of intense connection, it's supposed to be someone who's with you till the end. And then I started to realize, no, these are souls that come into our life to help a certain purpose, and then they can fall away, although I know others probably can be there further along the journey. So I just wanted to ask you if you could speak more about that. One question I have within that is, are husband and wives always part of a soul group, or not necessarily?
Well, let's understand something. We need to appreciate the fact that we all exist on many different dimensions. In other words, we're not just in a very linear, fixed dimension. We exist on many, many dimensions. An infinite God creates an infinite amount of probable worlds. And we exist in all those probable worlds, right? That's important to understand. Why is that important to understand? Because the whole concept of what they call in Torah, they call it Beshet, right? In Yiddish, we say Beshet, that this is your soulmate, this is your twin, this is your, whatever terms you want to use for these soulmates. We need to appreciate that this exists on many, many dimensions. Therefore, the Kabbalah tells us that the first zivug, which is the true zivug, is from the first lifetime. Since we believe that there are multiple lifetimes, right? Meaning a person is reincarnated. So therefore, the true zivug is from the first lifetime. That means in all other lifetimes, it's evaluated according to your suitability, not according to something which is predetermined.
Wow.
Right? Now, that fits more into what you were concerned about, which is that for sure, every lifetime they're part of your chaya, but they don't. It doesn't mean that they are your predetermined zivug.
Yes.
You understand the difference?
Yes.
Terry?
Really interesting.
You understand the difference?
Really interesting. Yeah.
Okay.
I can hear.
Okay.
Yeah.
Good.
Yeah.
Next.
No, thank you. Thank you for explaining that. Okay, so this is not my next question that I had written down, but it's the next question that I want to ask you because it's been on my mind since this talk. It's a bit of a strange question, but I've always had this feeling that that I don't of a fear of coming back, of feeling like I've done this too many times and my soul's tired, and the sense of pressure and also guilt, kind of thinking you're not getting this right. You are going to come back again because you're not getting this right. And we'll talk later about the development of self, and feeling like I'm getting closer, but knowing that I'm far from getting it right. And in this lifetime, could a soul feel tired? Could it feel like it's been here like many times and feel like, because it's a strange thing, but I've always said to my kids and Brian, I can't come back again. I don't know why I keep saying that. Is there any basis for that? I wanted to ask you. Yes.
Absolutely. There's no question about it. But there are two parts to it. The first part is that it's not a tiredness, it's an oldness. You're what they call in the world an old soul. Mm-hmm. Right? Now, old people feel tired, right? Mm-hmm. But it's not because you're tired, because you're an old soul, right? Yes. Now, there are two parts to this. Number one is it's a feeling that I just know so much and I can't understand why the world is still messing around with superficialities and things which are not important, right? It's kind of been done that. What's going on in the situation, right? Now, there's a second aspect to this, and that is that the Vilna Gaon writes in a very interesting explanation to the book of Yonah. The whole book of Yonah is a book about reincarnation, right? Where he goes through on the ship, which is life, and then he is thrown over, which is death, into the first he's first swallowed up by the male fish, which is the grave. Then the second is swallowed up by the female fish, which is Gehinnom, right? Which is I don't know, Gehinnom, hell. I don't know how you translate that, right? And then he's spat out again, which means he comes back into the world. And this time he does what he needs to do. And then it says he goes and sits outside the city and the sun burns down on him. Now, whenever the Torah uses the concept of a sun, it's referring to the zodiac, the sun system, the constellations, the sun system. And it says it's burning down on him. Now, and it says that it burns down him to the point where he just doesn't want to live anymore. He's just finished. And then, therefore, says the Vilna Gaon that when a person comes back in a Gilgul, his mazal, his zodiac, is very difficult. It kind of weighs on him, on her. So what you're actually experiencing, is two things. So number one would be the fact that coming back into the world is very difficult, right, as a result of the mazalot, which means a struggle. It's not just like you come back to fix something. You actually have to struggle through that experience. And number two, obviously, is that you need to fix what you're coming back into the world for. Now, there is a discussion. I think I mentioned this in the video. There is a discussion between Beis Shammai and Beis Hillel as to whether it would have been better for a person to have been born or not to have been born. And after 2 years of discussion, year and a half, 2 years of discussion, they concluded that it would have been better not for a person to have been born. So the Vilna Gaon says, obviously, I can't be speaking about the mental purpose of creation, which is that man should be created, and bring about a world of perfection. So he says that that's talking about should a person come back in a Gilgul, meaning the whole idea of being born back into a Gilgul. Right? Now, obviously, we want to get it right the first time. But if a person does have to come back, right, so therefore it would have been better not to have to come back. But since we do come back, and it is difficult, how do we know what we're supposed to do, right? So he brings the Gemara, which the Gemara says, Memashmesh b'masav, mefasfes b'masav. Memashmesh b'masav means to feel out one's deeds. That is all the area in which a person has a strong passion, right? Everybody has a different passion for different things. And the reality is that when you come, you should follow your passion. Hashem's not giving you the passion for no reason. There's a reason why you have this passion. And that is partly because that's part of your tikkun. Right? The second part is mefasfesh masav, search out your deeds, or all the areas you keep tripping up on. You know how it is when somebody does something like, I won't do that again, and they do it again. I won't do it again, they do it again. Right? So these are the two areas that a person can subconsciously be aware of as part of their tikkun, besides having to go through some kind of, regression or anything like that. That wouldn't be necessary if a person is just sensitive to the fact that that Hashem is showing them through the passion that they have and through the area which they keep tripping up on, that this is what you need to be fixing in your life. Now, the question is, why do we grapple with this? Why do we struggle with this so much? What's preventing us from okay, this is what I'm supposed to do, and just go right ahead with it? So I think we need to understand something. Tikkun is not an external expression. It's not something we need to do outside of ourselves. Obviously, tikkun is something we need to do within ourselves, right? All of life is about, right, discovering the authentic internal self in every single way. There is no truth external to a person. Nothing, right? Nobody can tell you they have the truth. There's no truth external to a person. All truth is contained within you, and the point is to get access to that truth. And obviously, right, when we're talking about truth, we're talking about your authentic self, right? That's the most important thing to understand. So problem number one is that there's just too much distraction. The external world provides a tremendous amount of distraction, whether it be what we see, what we read, what we feel, what we taste. But it doesn't matter what it is, but the external world is providing an unbelievable amount of distraction. And that prevents us from being internally focused. As I mentioned in the shir, in the video, right? Really, I teach what I teach. So a person should learn how to live, not how to die, but how to live, right? And that means that one has to be totally, constantly focused internally. It doesn't matter what you experience externally. The external is supposed to trigger and give you some greater awareness of your inner self, right? So that's number one. The problem is distraction. Number two, right, is the idea that Adam is me Adama. Man is from the earth, and in such we are very heavy, earthy, lazy. That's the nature of man. It's not anything wrong. It's the nature of man. And that's why man has to be given so many drives, because if it wasn't for those drives, we would just sit on the couch and die. You need a hunger drive to get you up to go to the fridge, because otherwise, being that earthy creature, we would just sit on the couch and die. So number one, even if we have something as powerful as a passion, as a drive, in terms of an internal passion to achieve something, if we don't have an external reason to do it, like honor, pleasure, all these different types of things, we won't do it. Now, obviously, where that passion results in something very spiritual, the external world is going to fight against that as much as possible. I'll just give you a bit of a marshal to this. It's one of the reasons why women have to go through birth pain is the fact that the forces of evil do not want that neshama to come into the world. So they'll do whatever they can to prevent that from happening. Now, this is obviously true in terms of the level of a child, but even more so perhaps in terms of one's own, what one self can birth into the world. What can I birth? What wisdom, what knowledge, what passion can I put into this world? So obviously, right, there is going to be this hitnagdut, this opposition to a person being able to bring out their passion in the world. Number one, because by nature they are lazy. And number two, because the forces of evil are not going to help the person. If a person's passion is for something, not so good, inappropriate, so then, of course, the Yetzirah is going to help as much as possible, right? As much as possible. But if it's for something which is really good and internal and real and authentic, it's going to be a struggle. We're going to have to grapple with that or that ability to bring out that passion in our lives. That's number one. Number two, which is perhaps even more fundamental. I don't know really more fundamental, but in the external world, we are judged according to what we accomplish in the world. That's how we are judged, right? If you succeed, you accomplish, you're rewarded. You don't succeed, you don't accomplish, you're not rewarded. In God's world, that's not how we are rewarded. In God's world, we have a concept, lefum tzara agra. According to the struggle is the reward. So it's kind of built into the system, right? It's built into the system, the idea that if I'm going to succeed, it's going to have to be with struggle. As we say, no pain, no gain, right? We don't live in a world where we leave the opposite of pain is pleasure. No. Pain and pleasure are synonymous, right? Rav Weinberg of Esher Torah once mentioned that. Pain and pleasure are synonymous, which means that if you want pleasure, if you want true access to your authentic self, to your inner self, to your real world, it's going to necessitate struggle. And obviously, it's difficult for us. It's difficult for us to actually struggle. Part of the reason why it's difficult for us is because we don't really appreciate the reward. Somebody who's going for the Olympic Games, they appreciate what's going to be the reward of working 8 hours a day in order to accomplish that. But since we're not quite aware of what it means to be authentic, what it means to live an inner self, or what it means to be self, stop. So it's very difficult to then be okay with the idea that I'm only going to get there through struggle. But that is the reality. The reality is that if you want the reward, you need to struggle, because the reward goes according to the struggle. According to the effort is how God judges a person. So obviously, the greater the gain, the greater the effort there's going to have to be. So I think these are some of the there's a whole share on this, a whole class on this, but nevertheless, I just want to bring out those 2 points.
So, no, because one of the things for me is that one of my big insights along my own personal journey, which you probably don't know my story, but I kind of written a book about it at one stage, but I almost lost. Oh, okay. So you know my story, but I was looking for perfection outside of myself because I didn't realize that it was already within. And I don't know why God kind of gifted me the experience to discover it within myself. Well, shortly after I actually had a suicide attempt and came out of a coma, I had this experience of touching into this love and this beauty and this perfection, and I was astounded. I always say I fell in love with myself, and I fell in love with the world, and fell in love with God. It was an incredible experience to have, and it kind of reordered the world for me. And part of what I've been sharing and teaching since is helping people to see that perfection, see that it gets kind of covered, so to speak, and that all it is an uncovering of what's already there. And, part of what we teach is that there are these things in the world, we call them attachments, that we outsource our sense of what we call well-being or shleimus to. We think if our finances are okay, then we can feel peaceful or touch into ourselves. And if people like us and appreciate us, and if we have success, and if the people we love are okay, and if our physical health, all these different things. And so we get so distracted with trying to control those different things. Our minds are preoccupied, and all that thinking covers the true self. So we don't even know the true self. And as we kind of challenge those attachments, see that logically, what we're looking for really is inside. And as they fall away, the thinking attached to them does. So my question to myself, well, what got in the way of me kind of touching into that part or getting to know that part of me? And what kind of the work that I do and that I share was seeing that there were a whole lot of things which we call attachments or outsources, things that we believe our inner self, our sense of shleimus is conditional on, things that have power over our capacity to feel connected and peaceful and free and optimistic. And those are things like financial security, people appreciating or liking us, achievement and success, even things like physical health, our loved ones' well-being, getting things right. And our minds become preoccupied with these things. And we have a lot of thinking about them, and we experience that thinking. And that's kind of what covers us experiencing our true self. And so part of what we do and the work we do is challenging those attachments, those kind of core beliefs, and seeing that, our sense of shlemus is within. It's not dependent on these things. And as those things weaken and start to fall away, all the thinking attached to them does too. And then a person experiences more of self and can build self and know self. So what do you think of that?
That's exactly. I mean, that's again, the challenge is the pneumius. Yes. The challenge is to find the internal authentic self. That's what the challenge. You should know. I know this. I don't know if you'll use this, but if you take a look in the book of Judges in Shoftim, right, Perek Gimel, the 3rd chapter, the 1st and 2nd and 3rd verses, you'll see over there that it speaks about the fact that this whole battle against Hamas, the Plishtim, is based on the fact that because we've lost we've lost the panim, the internal self, so therefore it's caused us to have to fight external wars.
Wow.
Right.
Sure.
Very powerful.
Sure. Very powerful.
Let's go. We've got a couple
of
more questions, right?
30 days before you die, your neshama leaves. As you said, the neshama is your purpose of wisdom, the wisdom of purpose, and you don't need it. You don't need it anymore because it's coming to an end. So I wanted to ask you, does a person sense this? Or if you're sensitive, do you sense this? And where does it go? Those were my 2 questions.
Okay. So again, I'm doing something that is not wise, but I'll start with the second question. It really doesn't go anywhere. It remains in the world of the neshamas, the world of the souls, which in our world that's called the world of Bria, of creation. It remains where it was. The thing is, though, that it was attached to us through what they call in Hebrew, it's called tzalalim, from the word tzel, which means a shadow, right? And the bottom line is they're basically 30 shadows, and each day another shadow is removed. Now, I'll explain the idea about shadows in a minute, but let me just develop this idea, right? So it's not like a one-moment shock. It's a slow process, a kind of gradual, like being peeled away. With great tzaddikim, it actually begins even longer than that, begins 6 months before. But it's a slow process of being removed. What I mean by tzel is, we say we're tzelem Elokim, we're the shadow of God in this world, right? Which means, in a certain sense, if you think about it, the way a shadow falls is that there's the light, then there's the body, and then the body throws a shadow.
Yes.
Right. So if we're the shadow of Hashem, that means our existence in this world. This sounds a bit weird, but it's really backwards, because when you make an image, you have to make it backwards so that when you stamp it, it comes the right way around.
Yes.
So therefore, what ends up happening is that our attachment to this physical world is like a shadow's attachment to the ground.
Yes.
If you remove the object, which is throwing the shadow, the light will then shine down and there's not going to be any more shadow. So that's really what's happening, is that our independent existence, our separate existence in this world, is slowly being removed.
Yes. They
say, for instance, that we don't let anybody apply this to our lives today, but on Hoshana Rabbah, if your body doesn't throw a shadow on the nighttime of Hoshana Rabbah, if the body doesn't throw a shadow, meaning the moon, right, throws come on your body and then it throws a shadow. If you don't see a shadow, that's an indication the person won't live through the year.
Wow.
Right? Because the shadow is an indication of the fact that you're there, that you're here.
Yes.
Once the shadow goes, it means you're not here anymore, which means that basically you're a pure light at that point.
Yes.
Is that
Yes.
clear? Right?
Uh-huh.
Pure
Mm-hmm.
light. So now you're asking, can a person know this? So yes, definitely. This
Mm-hmm.
is the concept of premonition,
Yeah.
right? Where people have a premonition. I
Yes.
think I mentioned over there one of the stories. Maybe I did, maybe I didn't. I don't remember. But a Persian girl from Los Angeles once mentioned that did I mention that story
Yeah.
there?
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah.
so
Yeah.
okay. So we see that there are premonitions. As you get closer and closer, as more and more shadows are removed, right? Meaning, and as more and more attachment to this world is removed, so you're becoming much more aware of everything around you in the world of the souls. That's why people start to, say, well, this auntie's coming, although the auntie passed away a long time ago, right?
Yes.
Or they begin to see all their ancestors coming to meet and greet them, etc., etc. Because really the ancestors are there. It's just all these shadows have been preventing you having access to it. And as they're removed, you become more aware of it.
So it wasn't a question I was going to ask you, but now that you brought it up, when you say that, what was interesting is that when my sister was, when she was dying, at that time, we still thought she was going to live longer. They were treating her, but, 48 hours later, she died. A very special person came into the room who's both a doctor and a deeply spiritual person. And he went into the room and came out and said to me, there are many souls in that room. He said, and he could sense them, see them. He's very special. Anyhow, so I wanted to ask you: do we know that? Do we know that there are souls that, what does that mean? They come to accompany the body, or they there?
Right.
Or, yeah.
It means it's a presence. It's
Yes.
a presence, right? And generally speaking, the presence are of the ancestors. But often they could be, for instance, if somebody studied the works of Rashi to a great degree, then Rashi will come. The presence of Rashi will come. Now, again, it's not Rashi coming; it's the presence of Rashi coming, because the person's losing all contact with this world.
Mm-hmm.
So, which means that they're becoming much more aware of the presence of everything which they consider to be important,
Yes.
everything they consider to be right. So
Yes.
it's interesting that the doctor was able to pick up on that. Look, he's obviously a sensitive person, but the person who's passing away is definitely able to pick up on that.
Yes. Well, an interesting thing I wanted to tell you is that when my sister, just the day before she died, she got a bit lucid and she called me in and she said, Tay, I have to have an honest conversation with you. She couldn't even see or speak properly because it was affecting her whole neurological system. And she said, I'm scared to die because I don't know how to die. They were told one of the things that I said to her was that as you become less connected to your body and your body's like kind of breaking down, you're going to go like inside, and so you'll know what to do. You won't feel scared, because the soul isn't scared to transition. It's just, it's kind of us. So I said, don't worry about that. It'll take care of itself. So it's almost like you saying, I felt that her attachment to what feels important in this physical world would loosen and weaken. But saying that, what I wanted to ask you is that the hospice people around us felt that she was, and you often see this, like fighting. And now her death came on very suddenly. From diagnosis to death, it was very, very sudden. And she had little children who were in the room all the time, her children who she loved so much. And you spoke about step one when we leave is beating of the grave, the 3 days of pain of leaving this world when you're attached to it. You spoke about it like more even attached from a material sense, but that can that be also your kids, your family? Because I felt watching her that I was watching a soul struggle. Almost, you could see almost leave the body and be pulled back in. I felt like the sounds, the noises, even when she was unconscious, it's almost like I felt like I was witnessing a battle. And was that tied to the beating of the grave that you were talking about?
Absolutely, no question about that. In fact, the Gemara brings down a story of somebody that was being kept alive by the knocking of an anvil outside the window.
Wow.
And as soon as the anvil stopped, the person left.
Sure.
And, there are many things which keep pulling us. And as you said, definitely the emotional pull, the emotional attachment is also something that is pulling. And that
Yes.
I mentioned that in the lecture, I mentioned the fact that, often in a hospital, the family be asked to step out for a moment, and then the person leaves because they don't want to go while they're still close to their loved ones and things like that. But they know they have to.
Exactly. We didn't want to leave because we knew when we left, she would go. And that's exactly what happened in the night. Apparently, 11:30, we left the room and she left. Yeah, we were staying there. So somebody told me, my best friend who passed away 3 years ago, passed away on Shabbos. And actually, Rabbi Tetz's daughter, Ruthie Helberstadt, told me there was something about a soul that passes on Shabbos who doesn't, the transition's very peaceful. They don't go through, which I didn't know about, but maybe that's the beatings of the grave. That it's because they weren't. Is that correct? So tied to this world, and shamas that pass on Shabbos. Is that true?
So yes, it is true. Meaning there's a truth to it. Put it that way. But we don't get away from who we are. In other words, as I mentioned, I don't know if I mentioned again, because I haven't listened to that particular lecture for a long time, but did I mention about the fact of that there's a difference between people who are very attached to this world and people who aren't. People who aren't attached to this world, they're leaving this world is like taking an eyelash out of milk.
Yes, out of milk. Yes,
right,
exactly. Yes,
right.
I was wondering if that was souls that passed on Shabbos, but I mean, I've seen people pass very peacefully and suddenly not on Shabbos.
Right. No, it's not. It's not. The benefit of Shabbos is that, it says that the souls don't go to Gehenna on Shabbos. All souls come out of Gehenna on Shabbos. Right. That's what. Yeah. All souls come out of Gehenna on Shabbos. So therefore there isn't that transition through the struggle. Let's put it out. Put it out there. It doesn't mean that after Shabbos it continues like it doesn't. Right after Shabbos, they still need to go through, because I want people to realize this is not a punishment. This is a healing process, right? And if you understand that, you want to heal.
Yes.
You don't want to bypass the healing process if you need to heal.
Yes.
So it could be that for the period of Shabbos, there is this peaceful transition. But after that, one still has to go through the healing process.
Yes. So let me ask you another question about the healing process, because this is something I said to myself, but I don't know if I was saying that to make myself feel better. But my sister suffered so much in the last 10 days, even before that, but especially as she died, till the moment she died. It was nothing peaceful about it. Is that a purification or a cleansing process when someone suffers so much physically?
Absolutely. Suffering of the physical body is in exact proportion to the healing of the spiritual body, which means like this.
Wow.
The correlation between physicality and spirituality is inverse. Something which is completely spiritual is not physical. Something which is completely physical is not spiritual, right? So therefore, we have a little bit of a problem. The problem is that if I want to be physical, that means I have to give up on my spirituality, which is difficult to understand that, because we don't have any choice but to be physical and to also at some point be able to appreciate the spirit. So therefore, suffering comes to the world so that, as you said, the emphasis on the physicality is limited. Because if there was no such a thing as suffering, then the physicality would be so strong, it wouldn't even give us the opportunity to access any spirituality. So therefore, as the suffering becomes greater and greater, I mentioned that in the class, that I know, as it becomes greater and greater, the person's access to spirituality becomes greater and greater.
Wow.
Because the suffering is removing the physical impact. So it becomes greater and greater, right? To the point where at some point they're like, okay, been there, done that, I'm ready to go.
Yes.
And then it's just easy.
Yes.
And they don't have to go through the beating of the grave afterwards.
Yes. Well, what was interesting is that my sister, who wanted to, until the end, the last few days, really live and had so much to live for and was young, was saying to me, I want to go. In fact, when the hospice person, she said, how long do I have? When they brought her home, she said about 2 weeks. She went, oh my gosh, I can't do that. Which is, you'd think, someone would say that who 2 weeks before was flying on an airplane, She's like, I can't do that. She was almost dismayed to hear them saying you've got 2 more weeks, So, yeah.
But they were wrong, right, Terry? They were wrong.
No, yeah, it was 48 hours. They said up to 2 weeks. This could go on for 2 weeks. Yeah. So thank you for talking about that. I think it's important to know that it's a healing. The whole Gehinnom and the steps that we go through afterwards is a healing, a purification. And because we in the Olam HaEmes, then I'm sure that we want that. We realize the need for that. Not
There's
like here. Yeah.
That's right. The Medrash says clearly that, and this is a blow-away Medrash, like teaching, unbelievable teaching. The teaching says that just as the people in Gan Eden in heaven are saying how wonderful it is and how much they appreciate this and they're so glad God gave them this, the people in Gehinnom are doing the same thing.
Wow. Incredible. That's beautiful.
It's like to think.
Beautiful.
They become aware. This is what I need, and I want this. As painful as it is, I want it because this is what I need.
I think we can relate to it in this world when you really open yourself up to Nisayon. That part where you see Hashem's almost love and that this is going to break you, but evolve you. You see, and you open yourself. It's probably a little bit of that rather than.
Terry, we don't have to go to such a sophisticated way of understanding that when a person works out in a gym, building muscle means you have to tear muscle.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So, and they're quite happy to do that.
Yes.
Because they know what's going to be afterwards.
Exactly. And childbirth's an obvious example.
Right.
Yeah. So this is the big question that I had. Because everybody likes to say when someone passes away, don't worry, they're watching you and they're helping you and you can talk and they know what's going on, as if the souls are intimately still watching us and around us. And I know after my sister passed away, somebody intimated to me at the Shiva, not so simple. And they didn't want to go into it, almost as if to disappoint me, that it wasn't like she was listening to me and hearing me and watching us and around the Shiva, etc. What is the relationship between the soul and us that they've left behind? Is there any?
No. So for the first year, there's definitely tremendous, involvement. Definitely in terms of the Kibbutz HaKever, they're trying to stay here, right? So for sure, they're definitely aware of what's going on here, and they travel between the grave and the house, all the time, right?
Yes.
But and then. The kafakele also, the slingshot where they're trying to leave but being pulled down by this world, trying to leave, being pulled down. Obviously, they're aware then of what's going on as well. In Gehinnom, it's a little bit less, meaning they're still aware, but they're going through their healing process. It's more like, if I could use the word, like occupying their being, their existence, much more. Now, the question is after that, meaning after the year is complete, then it's based on whether they want to know what's going on or they don't want to know what's going on. Because at that point, they're very much aware of everything that's going on in this world is perfect.
Yes.
God's made no mistakes.
Yes.
Right? Whatever my sister has to go through is perfect. I'm not worried about her. She's doing great. Everything's wonderful.
Yes.
And then it's a question of, okay, so now I'm basking in the glory of Hashem's, existence. So is it really that important to me what's going on in the world?
Yes.
And that's where the problem lies, in people going to the graves, because then you're forcing them to come back.
Oh, interesting.
Right? Because now you're appealing to them. So, et cetera, which is okay. I mean, again, that's part of the whole process of being that great person and being that person, et cetera, et cetera. I'm not saying that. I don't belittle that. I think it's fine.
Mm-hmm.
And this is comfort for them, and it's a skus for the person who's passed on and everything like that. Fine, not a problem. But that's the understanding, is that if they want to know what's going on, they can know what's going on. But most of them don't want to know what's going on because they know it's fine. Everything's fine. Everything's perfect.
Yes.
I don't have to be involved in that.
So why would any one of them want to know what's going on when you describe the process of Gehinnom and what they now know? What would make a soul want to know what's going on?
So there's a medrash which says that when the Churban was taking place, the destruction of the temple was taking place. So and all the suffering that was going on. So Eliyahu Navi went to wake up the Avos, went to wake up Avram, Yitzchak, and Yaakov, right? To tell them, listen, your children are suffering. Get up there and appeal to God. What are you doing? So what does it mean? It means they were sleeping, meaning they knew everything was perfect. What do they have to be worried about?
Yes.
So they needed to be woken up to get involved.
Yes. Yes.
So that's really what's going on with everybody in that sense, not on such a level, but they need to be woken up. When you appeal, right, you go to the grave and you appeal to, right, through them, please go stand before God and beg him for us.
Yes.
You're like kind of waking them up that they then come and help you out. Yeah.
I see. And I'm just conscious of the time, but I was wondering about mediums, if they interfere, with.
Okay, next time. Mediums are ruchot. That's not an issue.
Yeah.